Welcome back, guys. In episode 1, link in right upper corner, we discussed in detail the traditional parameters of detecting acid-base balance, including the renal and respiratory compensatory physiologies and the buffer systems. Without further ado, let's get into the compensatory mechanics of traditional approach, followed by a new way of looking at acid-base balance, that is, the STEWART approach. In respiratory issues, we know that the carbon dioxide balance is upset, so kidneys kick in. In respiratory acidosis, CO2 is increased, in response to which the kidneys increase bicarb reabsorption and hydrogen excretion, thus trying to balance the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. In respiratory alkalosis, carbon dioxide is reduced, so kidneys excrete bicarb ions in an effort to balance pH. Note that response of kidneys is delayed. In fact, for a full optimal level, response of the kidneys requires 3 to 5 days. In metabolic acidosis, bicarb is reduced, so lungs come into action. The response of lungs is swift, so when bicarb is low, lungs hyperventilate and wash out carbon dioxide to balance the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. In metabolic alkalosis, the bicarb increase is balanced by hypoventilation, so that the carbon dioxide levels are increased. However, the response to metabolic alkalosis is limited, because hypoventilation can cause hypoxia. Now, the bicarb buffer system is more efficient against non-volatile acids than volatile ones. That is, it is more effective against metabolic than respiratory acid-base disorder. For example, if we add 3 milliequivalents per liter of hydrochloric acid in the body, then bicarb buffer would immediately come into action and antagonize 3 milliequivalents of hydrogen ions, converting them into carbonic acid and subsequently carbon dioxide. So, to neutralize 3 milliequivalents of hydrogen ions, 3 milliequivalents of bicarb ion will be consumed, and bicarb would fall from normal 24 milliequivalents per liter to new value of 21 milliequivalents per liter, right? In first episode, we discussed how normal pH of 7.4 is derived with 40 nanoequivalents per liter of hydrogen ions. So, bringing that equation in hydrochloric acid scenario, the carbon dioxide would remain constant at 40 because the lungs clear out any extra carbon dioxide formed in the process of converting the 3 milliequivalents per liter of hydrogen ions. The bicarb would be 21. So new pH of body would be around 7.34, which is still a great buffering effort considering we added 3 milliequivalents per liter of hydrochloric acid, which is not a small amount. But what happens when we have respiratory acidosis? To understand why bicarb isn't much effective system in respiratory disorder, remember that hydrogen ions are in nanoequivalents per liter, whereas bicarb that we are discussing in equation is in milliequivalents per liter, which is a huge amount compared to nanoequivalent. So if any issue causes hypoventilation, causing an increase in carbon dioxide levels, let's say carbon dioxide rises from 40 to 80 millimeters of mercury. Now as per equation, hydrogen and bicarb generated will be in 1:1, right? So increase in carbon dioxide levels of 40 millimeters of mercury would generate 40 nanoequivalents per liter of hydrogen ions and 40 nanoequivalents per liter of bicarb ions in a 1:1, right? So how much compensatory increase through buffer system? 40 nanoequivalents of bicarb, if we convert it into milliequivalents, is 0.00040 milliequivalents per liter. So new value of bicarb would be 24.00004 milliequivalents per liter. Put that into equation, 80 for carbon dioxide levels and 24.00004 for bicarb ions. The net hydrogen ion calculated this way, new value of hydrogen ion will be 80 nanoequivalents per liter, which makes the pH of 7.1. So these are amongst a few limitations unexplained by traditional way of looking at acid-base balance of body, right? Let's say there is respiratory acidosis. Carbon dioxide levels are high and you give soda bicarb. What would it do? The added bicarb ion would, in an effort to neutralize hydrogen ions, convert and shift the equation to formation of carbon dioxide. Since carbon dioxide is dependent on carbon dioxide production divided by alveolar ventilation, so when carbon dioxide production would increase, it would further worsen the respiratory acidosis, right? Unless you control the alveolar ventilation. What about metabolic acidosis, where bicarb levels are low, right? Now adding soda bicarb, the added bicarb would reduce the free acid but also increase the carbon dioxide load. which can compound the problem by adding respiratory acidosis to already established metabolic acidosis. Unless carbon dioxide levels are checked as per the carbon dioxide equation, ventilation must increase to manage the added carbon dioxide load, right? So in spontaneous breathing patient, minute ventilation increases by 1 to 4 liters per minute with every rise in carbon dioxide above 40. Similarly, in ventilated case, one may require to increase the tidal volume or respiratory rate on ventilator to increase the minute ventilation in order to wash out the extra carbon dioxide when soda bicarb is given for metabolic acidosis. I'll place a question here. What if then it's not the bicarb in soda bicarb that reverses acidosis? What if it's the sodium ion that does it? Confused? We will answer that in STEWART approach in coming 5 minutes. Since traditional approach has many limitations in covering metabolic aspect of disorder and how compensations occur, the concept of base excess came in. Base excess or base deficit is the amount of base or acid that needs to be added to bring the pH back to normal. If the number is in minus, it is called the base deficit, and this happens in acidosis. If it is positive number, it means base is in excess. So it's metabolic alkalosis, right? For example, if we have base deficit of minus 10 on ABG in metabolic acidosis, so we can calculate the amount of soda bicarb that should be given to bring the pH back to normal. So the formula is base deficit into 30% of body weight. This 30% of body weight, which is technically the extracellular space in which the bicarb would be distributed. So for a 70 kg man, the amount is around 210 milliequivalents per liter. Practically half of this value is given. To sum up the traditional way of acid-base functioning, keep this equation in mind. In respiratory acidosis, primary issue is increase in carbon dioxide levels, compensated by bicarb ions. For acute respiratory acidosis, bicarb increase is 1 to 2 milliequivalents per liter for every 10 millimeters of mercury rise in carbon dioxide. For chronic case, kidneys kick in and bicarb rise is 3 to 4 milliequivalents per liter for every 10 mm rise in carbon dioxide levels. In respiratory alkalosis, primary issue is low carbon dioxide levels, compensated by decrease in bicarb levels. In acute way, kidneys are still warming up. So bicarb reduction is 1 to 2 milliequivalents per 10 mm of mercury decrease in carbon dioxide. In chronic case, kidneys have fully kicked in now, and bicarb reduction is 4 to 5 milliequivalents per liter for every 10 mm decrease in carbon dioxide. In metabolic acidosis, the primary change is reduction in bicarb ions. Hyperventilation kicks in immediately to reduce the carbon dioxide levels. For every 1 milliequivalent per liter decrease in bicarb, the carbon dioxide pressure also decreases to 1.2 millimeters of mercury. In metabolic alkalosis, primary issue is bicarb increase. We said how lungs response is limited because to raise carbon dioxide levels to compensate, it must hypoventilate, which can cause hypoxia. So there will be only 0.6 to 0.7 millimeters rise in carbon dioxide levels for every 1 milliequivalent per liter increase in bicarb ions. Just a small poke into knowledge, the alveolar gas equation. So as per this equation, if you increase the carbon dioxide levels, then beyond a certain value, it would start decreasing the oxygen levels in alveoli. We will study that when we are covering the oxygen cascade soon. These are but a few limitations of traditional approach of looking at acid-base balance. The whole dynamic is based on Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, and even in that equation, the bicarb is a calculated term, not the actual measured one. The role of ions, sodium, chloride, but if it's not the bicarb in soda bicarb that reverses the acidosis, rather it's the sodium ion. But if it's not the loss of hydrogen from stomach in vomiting, but the loss of chloride that causes alkalosis? What if it's the same ion of chloride that furosemide gives away in kidneys that causes alkalosis from furosemide? Why Ringer's lactate is considered physiological fluid? And what is the role of albumin and many other proteins and phosphate? This is not fully understandable through traditional approach. The working of metabolic component of disorder. The respiratory is of course straightforward, carbon dioxide related. So let's see acid-base balance from a rather newer approach called the STEWART approach. The approach in itself is not that new. It was first floated around in 1980s, but the world is catching up to it gradually. So let's begin STEWART approach. Ever wondered in traditional approach, we said pH is dependent on hydrogen ion, which is of course in nanoequivalents per liter. So where is this hydrogen ion source? What if in the body there is a source of literally infinite hydrogen ions? Yes, you guessed it right. Water makes up 60% of body weight. Strictly speaking, water doesn't just exist as H2O. It has a property of self-ionizing into hydrogen ions and hydroxyl ions. Within the water body, the hydrogen and hydroxyl ions form bonds to form H2O. Then there are intermolecular forces giving it the surface tension properties too. But every now and then, the kinetic energy becomes strong enough to dissociate these ions. So hydrogen ion sort of bounces around between different molecules from H2O to hydronium H3O, which for ease we just write H positive. So principally the two key ions in H2O are hydrogen and hydroxyl ion. The Stewart principle can be explained by definitions given of acid base by Arrhenius. So an acid is one that gives away hydrogen ion and a base is one that gives away hydroxyl ion. So water in a solution has amphoteric properties. It can give off hydrogen and it can also give off the hydroxyl ion. Pure water is neutral because hydrogen and hydroxyl ions are in equal quantity at 1 into 10 raised power minus 7 under the law of dissociation equilibrium. Now any solution in which hydrogen ions exceed this balance is acidic, and any solution in which hydroxyl ion exceeds this balance is basic. Under the law of dissociation equilibrium, the sum of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions within water must remain at 1 into 10 raised power minus 14 or constant. It should remain constant. So if hydrogen ions increase in water, a concomitant decrease in hydroxyl ion occurs and vice versa. So the net sum remains constant. For example, if anything causes water to give away hydrogen ions, reducing hydrogen ions concentration in water to 10 raised power minus 4, then to keep the net sum to a constant of 1 into 10 raised to the power minus 14, water will strongly hold on to the hydroxyl ions such that hydroxyl ion amount would be 1 into 10 raised power minus 10. So the total sum of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions would remain constant. Where hydrogen ions are in 40 nanoequivalents per liter, water reservoir in body has very high molarity of around 55 molar, or in other words around 42 kgs of water is present in 70 kg person. So imagine if this blue color highlighter represents water, the hydrogen ion of 40 nanoequivalents per liter is microscopic, like maybe a tiny dot. In short, there can be no shortage of hydrogen ions in the body with such a huge reservoir, right? So even if the kidneys excrete huge amount of hydrogen ions, or vomiting takes away a huge amount of hydrogen from the stomach, they could easily be replaced by more hydrogen ions from water, right? So this all doesn't add up by traditional approach. So the question then really is, what are the forces that affect whether the water will give off the hydrogen to the body or hydroxyl ions to the body? Or what are the forces that persuade the dissociation of water into one of its ions in the body and in short affect the acid-base balance of body? There are three main components that influence the decision of water to give off hydrogen to the body or hydroxyl ions. Number 1, the PCO2. We have studied how it generates the hydrogen. Number 2, the strong ion difference. And number 3, the total weak acids in the body. Anything that will force a hydrogen ion away from water into body would cause acidosis, and vice versa for hydroxyl ion. This is explained through law of electroneutrality. Let's discuss how hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide work. Now, under law of electroneutrality, the sum of cations must equal sum of anions in the body. So when hydrochloric acid is added to the body, it completely dissociates into hydrogen and chloride. So the chloride ion or the anion will increase in amount. So to follow the law of electroneutrality, the hydrogen ion will be forced out of water to balance out the excess negative charge of chloride, right? In other words, the chloride ion is forcing water to give away the hydrogen ion to the body. So total hydrogen ions will reduce in water, right? Now, obeying the law of dissociation constant, the water will try to hold on to the hydroxyl ions and not let the hydroxyl ions easily get donated to the body. This way, the sum of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions within the water would remain constant at 1 into 10 raised to the power minus 14. So basically, the chloride or anion is acidic in nature since it derived hydrogen away from water and into the body. The more chloride you add to the body, the more hydrogen dissociation away from water and the more acidosis in the body, right? This explains how hyperchloremia causes acidosis. What about sodium? It would pull away the hydroxyl ions from water to maintain the electroneutrality in body. To conserve the law of dissociation equilibrium, water will this time not let the hydrogen ions break away that easily into body. So can I say these cations are basic in nature as they derive hydroxyl ions into the system and stop water from giving away the hydrogen ions easily? This explains how sodium in soda bicarb helps tackle acidosis. So let's see strong ions now. Strong ions are the ones that completely dissociate in solution, like HCl, which completely dissociated giving off chloride. So chloride is a strong ion. Similarly, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, these are all strong ions. Just remember, in the body, cations should equal the anions. So the difference between the sum of cations minus the sum of measurable anions is called the strong ion difference. Since weak acids remain relatively constant under the third law, which is the law of mass conservation, the strong ion difference value is around 42. This 42 represents the unmeasured anions in the body, right? We said cations are basic in nature, like sodium, and anions like chloride are acidic. If you increase the cations in body, the strong ion difference will increase as per this equation. Now this would cause alkalosis, right? So as per this concept, if we lose the chloride in Ng tube drainage, this will increase the strong ion difference and cause alkalosis. So it isn't the hydrogen ion loss from Ng tube that causes alkalosis, rather it's the chloride ion. Similarly, Lasix or furosemide causes more chloride loss in kidneys compared to the sodium loss. So strong ion difference will increase. And that shows Lasix can cause alkalosis. On the contrary, any issue causing reduced strong ion difference, be it a decrease in strong cations or an increase in strong anions, would cause acidosis. We know about lactic acidosis. Similarly, in hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis, it's the chloride ion causing decrease in strong ion difference. That's the real culprit. When you give too much of 0.9% sodium chloride, the fluid adds chloride to the extracellular fluid more than the sodium. So the net change in strong ion difference favors acidosis. The third is weak acids. So the weak acids, mainly the albumin and the phosphates, remain constant under the law of mass conservation. So overall, where traditional approach revolved around the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, the STEWART approach relies on this equation. So the strong ion difference minus the sum of carbon dioxide and total weak acids must be 0. If the sum is in minus, it is acidosis. If the sum is positive, it is alkalosis. So for acidosis to happen, it happens if there is decrease in strong ion difference or increase in carbon dioxide or increase in albumin or phosphate. Albumin and phosphate being the weak acids. On the contrary, alkalosis happens if there is increase in strong ion difference or a decrease in carbon dioxide or a decrease in weak acids. Why are we still not using the STEWART approach more often? Because ABGs still remain easily available bedside test, but future seems to be favoring the STEWART approach as it is answering so many questions about metabolic aspects and fluid systems. So in the coming episode, we will finally understand how to quickly read ABGs from traditional approach, and we will practice a few ABGs for memory. But before that, I want you to revise these equations because these are the 6 disincentives, I would say, of traditional approach of reading ABGs, where you have to memorize these formulations in order to understand the compensation and partial compensations. Take care and see you.